Hey everyone. Tonight, I have 5 deeply disturbing stories from people who were working alone, late at night, after everyone else had gone home, when something terrifying happened. Working late can be unsettling. The building becomes unfamiliar in the darkness. Every sound echoes differently. You're surrounded by empty spaces that should be full of people, but aren't. And when you're the only one there, when something goes wrong, there's no one to help. No one to tell you it's just your imagination. These 5 stories will make you think twice about staying late at the office. Let's begin. Story 1. The Security Guard. This first story comes from a security guard named Marcus, who worked the night shift at a large office building in downtown Chicago. Marcus had been working security for about 3 years. He'd gotten used to the routine, patrolling empty floors, checking doors, monitoring cameras. It was usually quiet and uneventful. The building he worked in was 12 stories tall, housing various tech companies and financial firms. During the day, it was bustling with hundreds of employees. At night, it was empty, except for Marcus. One night in November, around 2 a.m., Marcus was doing his rounds on the 8th floor when he heard something. Voices. Coming from one of the offices. Marcus stopped and listened. The voices were faint but distinct. Multiple people talking. That was strange. The building should have been completely empty. Marcus walked toward the sound. It was coming from a conference room at the end of the hallway. Light was visible under the door. Marcus knocked. "Security, is anyone in there?" The voices stopped immediately. Silence. Marcus knocked again. "I need you to open the door." No response. Marcus pulled out his keys and unlocked the door. He pushed it open. The conference room was empty. The lights were on, but there was no one there. Marcus checked under the table, behind the door, everywhere someone could hide. Nothing. He was certain he'd heard voices, multiple people talking, but the room was empty. Marcus turned off the lights and continued his rounds, feeling uneasy. About an hour later, while Marcus was on the 4th floor, he got an alert from the security system. Motion detected on the 8th floor, in the same conference room. Marcus checked the camera feed on his phone. The lights in the conference room were on again, and he could see shadows moving across the walls, like people were walking around inside. Marcus's heart started racing. He radioed his supervisor. "I've got movement on 8, that conference room again. Can you see anything on your monitors?" His supervisor checked. "I'm seeing the motion alert, but the camera feed is just showing an empty room. No people." "That's impossible. I can see shadows moving." "I'm looking at the same feed, Marcus. There's nothing there." Marcus decided to go back to the 8th floor. When he reached the conference room, the lights were still on. He could hear the voices again, louder this time. Marcus pressed his ear against the door. He could hear them clearly now. People talking, discussing something, but he couldn't make out the words. Marcus burst through the door. The room was empty, but the voices continued for a few seconds after he entered. Then they stopped. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He backed out of the room and called his supervisor again. "Something's wrong up here. I'm hearing voices, but there's no one here. His supervisor sighed. Marcus, you're not the first guard to report this. That conference room, there's something off about it. What do you mean? About 5 years ago, there was an incident in that room. A meeting went bad. One of the executives had a heart attack and died right there at the table. Ever since then, guards have reported strange things. Voices, shadows, motion detectors going off. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? We don't like to spook new guards, but now you know. Most of us just avoid that floor at night. Marcus finished his shift, but requested to be transferred to a different building. His request was approved. But before he left, Marcus looked up the incident his supervisor had mentioned. He found news articles about it. An executive named Robert Brennan had died during a board meeting in that conference room. Marcus found a photo of Robert, and his blood ran cold. In one of his security camera screenshots from that night, a still image of the empty conference room, there was something in the corner. A translucent figure sitting in one of the chairs. It looked exactly like Robert Brennan. Marcus never worked security in an office building again, because he knows what he heard, and he knows what was in that room. Story 2. The Closing Shift. This story comes from a woman named Jenna, who worked as a manager at a retail store in a shopping mall in Ohio. Jenna often worked closing shifts, which meant staying until 10 p.m. to lock up after the store closed at 9 p.m. The mall itself stayed open until 9 p.m., but by the time Jenna finished closing procedures, the entire mall was usually empty, except for a few other closing managers and security guards. One night, in October, Jenna was finishing up. She'd sent her last employee home and was doing the final walkthrough, checking dressing rooms, making sure everything was locked up. As she walked through the store, she heard something. Footsteps in the mall corridor outside her store. Jenna looked through the storefront. The mall was dark. Most of the lights had been turned off for the night, but she could see someone walking past her store. A figure, wearing what looked like a long coat or cloak, walking slowly down the empty corridor. Jenna felt uneasy. Mall security usually walked around, but they wore uniforms. This person looked different. Jenna locked the front gate of her store and decided to take the back exit instead, the employee hallway that led directly to the parking garage. But as she walked through the stockroom toward the back door, she heard something that made her freeze. The front gate of her store was rattling. Someone was trying to open it. Jenna's heart was pounding. She walked back to the front and looked through the security gate. The figure in the cloak was standing right outside her store, pulling on the gate, trying to get in. "We're closed," Jenna shouted. The figure stopped pulling and slowly turned to face her. Jenna couldn't see their face. It was hidden in shadow. The figure raised one hand and pointed directly at Jenna. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the mall. Jenna grabbed her phone and called mall security. "There's someone in the mall. They were trying to get into my store. Can you send someone?" Security said they'd check it out. Jenna waited in her store, the door to the back room locked, watching through the gate. 5 minutes later, a security guard appeared. "You called about someone in the mall?" "Yes, there was someone outside my store wearing a long coat or cloak. They were trying to open my gate."
The guard frowned. We haven't seen anyone on the cameras. The mall's been empty for the past 30 minutes except for you and 2 other closing managers. That's impossible. I saw them. They were right here. The guard radioed his partner and asked them to check the security footage. After a few minutes, the response came back. No one on the cameras, just you. Jenna showed the guard where the figure had been standing. The guard examined the area with his flashlight. On the floor, directly in front of Jenna's store, were wet footprints leading from the fountain area of the mall to Jenna's store, and then stopping, not continuing anywhere else, just stopping. Where did these come from? The guard muttered. It hasn't rained. The fountain's been off all day. Jenna felt her skin crawl. The guard escorted Jenna to her car. The next day, Jenna asked other closing managers if they'd ever seen anything strange in the mall at night. One of them, a woman who'd worked there for 10 years, pulled Jenna aside. You saw the walker, didn't you? The what? That's what we call it. The figure in the cloak. It shows up every few months, always at night, always when someone's alone. It walks the mall corridors. And if it stops at your store, something bad is about to happen. Jenna felt sick. What do you mean, something bad? Every time someone reports seeing it stop at their store, within a week there's an incident, a robbery, a fire. Someone gets hurt. It's like a warning. Jenna didn't want to believe it, but 4 days later, her store was broken into during the night. Someone smashed through the back door and stole merchandise and cash from the safe. Jenna quit 2 weeks later. She couldn't work there anymore because she knows what she saw, and she knows it was a warning. The walker had pointed at her, and something bad had followed.
Story 3, The Hospital Night Shift. This story comes from a nurse named Patricia, who worked the night shift in the emergency room of a hospital in rural Pennsylvania. Patricia had been an ER nurse for over 20 years. She'd seen everything: trauma cases, cardiac arrests, psychiatric emergencies. Not much fazed her anymore. But one night, something happened that shook her to her core. It was around 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, one of the quieter nights. The ER had been empty for a few hours. Patricia was the only nurse on duty, along with one doctor who was resting in the on-call room. Patricia was at the nurse's station doing paperwork when she heard something. The automatic doors to the ER entrance opened. Patricia looked up, expecting to see a patient. No one came in. The doors stayed open for a moment, then slowly closed. Patricia frowned. Sometimes the sensors malfunctioned. She went back to her paperwork. A few minutes later, the doors opened again. Still no one. Patricia walked over to the entrance and looked outside. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no people. She checked the sensor. It seemed fine. As Patricia turned to go back to the nurse's station, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps. In the hallway. Heavy footsteps. Walking down the corridor that led to the patient rooms. But all the rooms were empty. Patricia grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the sound. "Hello? Is someone here?" The footsteps stopped. Patricia reached the hallway. It was dark. Half the lights had been turned off to save energy during the night. She shone her flashlight down the corridor. Empty. But then she noticed something. The door to room 7 was open. Patricia knew that room had been empty all night, and the doors were always kept closed. She approached the door slowly. "Hello?" She pushed the door open wider and looked inside. Someone was sitting on the bed. An elderly man, wearing a hospital gown. His back was to her. "Sir, are you a patient? How did you get in here?" The man didn't respond. Patricia walked into the room. "Sir, I need you to answer me. Are you feeling okay?" She walked around the bed to face him, and her heart stopped. His eyes were closed. His skin was gray, cold. He wasn't breathing. He was dead. Patricia immediately checked for a pulse. Nothing. She hit the emergency button and called for the doctor. The on-call doctor arrived quickly. "Patricia, what happened?" "I found him, sitting here. He's deceased, but I don't know who he is. He wasn't admitted tonight." They checked the hospital's system. No one matching the man's description had been admitted. The doctor examined the body. "Patricia, this man's been dead for hours. Rigor mortis has already set in. There's no way he just sat down here." Patricia felt dizzy. "But I saw him. He was sitting up." Security was called. They reviewed the cameras. The footage showed Patricia walking into the room alone. No one else entered or left. But Patricia insisted she'd seen someone. The police were called. They identified the man as Walter Perkins, a homeless man who'd been reported missing 3 days earlier. He died of exposure. His body had been found in a field about 2 miles from the hospital. But that was earlier in the evening. His body was at the morgue, downtown, not at this hospital. "That's impossible," Patricia said. "I saw him right here." But there was no explanation. Walter Perkins' body had been at the morgue all night. Yet Patricia had seen him, or something, sitting in room 7. Patricia requested a transfer to the day shift. She couldn't work nights anymore. Because she knows what she saw, and she knows that room 7 was empty when she walked in. But someone was sitting on that bed. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone who was already dead.
Story 4. The Office After Hours. This story comes from a man named David who worked late one night at his company's office building in downtown Seattle. David was a software engineer. He often stayed late when he had big projects with tight deadlines. He was used to being alone in the office after everyone left. This particular night, David was the only one in the office. It was around 11 p.m., and he was deep into his work, sitting at his desk with headphones on. After about an hour, David took off his headphones to stretch and take a break. That's when he heard it. Typing. The sound of someone typing on a keyboard coming from across the office. David looked up. The office was dark, except for his desk lamp and the glow of his monitors, but he could definitely hear typing. Rapid, consistent typing, like someone working. "Hello?" David called out. The typing stopped. David stood up and walked toward where the sound had come from. It was coming from a cubicle about 30 feet away. As David approached, he could see the glow of a computer monitor. Someone was at the desk. "Hey, I didn't know anyone else was here." He reached the cubicle and looked over the wall. The chair was empty, but the computer was on, and on the screen, a document was open. Words were appearing on the screen. Someone was typing, but there was no one sitting at the keyboard. David felt his blood run cold. He watched in horror as words continued to appear, letter by letter, as if invisible hands were typing them. You should leave. David stumbled backward. The typing stopped. David grabbed his laptop and backpack and ran for the elevator. As he waited for it to arrive, he heard something else. Footsteps, running toward him from the office. The elevator arrived just in time. David jumped in and frantically pressed the ground floor button. As the doors closed, he saw a shadow move across the office. Something tall. Something that shouldn't be there. David never went back to that office alone. The next day, he told his manager what happened. His manager looked uncomfortable. David, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. That cubicle, it belonged to a programmer named Alex Chen. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Right at his desk. We found him the next morning. David felt sick. And no one thought to tell me this? We didn't want to make people uncomfortable. But yeah, some people have reported strange things. Computers turning on by themselves, documents being opened, and a few people have heard typing late at night. David requested to work from home permanently. His request was approved, but he still has nightmares about what he saw. Words appearing on a screen, typed by hands he couldn't see. A message: you should leave. And David knows. If he hadn't left when he did, if he'd stayed in that office, whatever was typing that message might have done more than just warn him.
Story 5. The Warehouse Night Shift. This final story comes from a warehouse worker named Carlos, who was working the overnight shift at a distribution center in New Jersey. Carlos had been working nights at the warehouse for about 6 months. His job was to pick orders, operate machinery, and keep the warehouse organized during the quiet overnight hours. The warehouse was massive, over 200,000 square feet of inventory, aisles, and shelving that stretched up to 30 feet high. Carlos usually worked with one other person, but this particular night, his coworker had called in sick. Carlos was alone. Around 2 a.m., Carlos was operating a forklift in one of the back aisles when he heard something, a voice, calling his name. Carlos. It was faint, echoing through the warehouse. Carlos stopped the forklift and looked around. Hello? No response. Carlos convinced himself he'd imagined it and went back to work. A few minutes later, he heard it again. Carlos, help me. This time it was louder, more urgent. It sounded like it was coming from the far end of the warehouse. Carlos grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the sound. Is someone here? Do you need help? Carlos, over here. Carlos followed the voice. It led him to the oldest section of the warehouse, an area that was rarely used anymore, filled with discontinued inventory and damaged goods. Where are you? Carlos called out. Here, behind the shelves. Carlos shone his flashlight between the tall shelving units, and that's when he saw something that made his stomach drop. A figure, crouched behind some boxes.
hiding. "Hey, are you okay?" Carlos asked. The figure slowly stood up. It was tall. Too tall. Its proportions were wrong. Arms too long. Head tilted at an unnatural angle. And when it turned to face Carlos, he saw that it had no face. Just smooth, blank skin where a face should be. Carlos ran. He ran through the aisles, his flashlight bouncing, his heart pounding. Behind him, he could hear footsteps, heavy, fast, gaining on him. Carlos ran to the warehouse office and locked himself inside. He called 911, gasping for breath. "There's something in the warehouse. I don't know what it is. Please send help." Carlos stayed in the office, watching through the window until police arrived. Officers searched the warehouse but found no one. No signs of forced entry, no evidence anyone else had been there. But they did find something disturbing. In the area where Carlos had seen the figure, there were marks on the floor. Long scrape marks, like something heavy had been dragged. And there was a smell, a terrible, rotting smell that the officers couldn't identify. Carlos quit that night. He walked off the job and never went back. The warehouse manager tried to convince him it was just stress, exhaustion, his mind playing tricks. But Carlos knows what he saw. Something was in that warehouse. Something that knew his name. Something that called to him, lured him to the back of the warehouse, where no one would hear him scream. And Carlos knows, if he hadn't run when he did, he would have disappeared. Just another unsolved missing persons case, another name on a list, never found. So, which story unsettled you the most? The security guard who encountered voices and shadows from a meeting that never ended? The retail manager who was warned by the walker? The nurse who found a dead man sitting in an empty hospital room? The software engineer whose deceased coworker sent him a message? Or the warehouse worker who was lured by something without a face? Let me know in the comments below. These stories remind us that when we're alone at work, in those vast, empty spaces designed for hundreds but occupied by just one, we're vulnerable. And sometimes we're not as alone as we think. So the next time you're working late, alone in the building, remember, lock your doors, stay aware, and if something feels wrong, trust your instincts and leave. Because sometimes the reason you feel like you're being watched is because you are. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe out there.